If you guys are fans of woodpeckers, you probably know that they recently came out with this Versa fence face upgrade and the auxiliary rip fence, which are upgrades for your table saw. They're very similar, but they're very different, and in this video, we're going to go over what sets these two apart. We're going to cover price, compatibility, how each one affects your scale indicator, how one of these fences affects your use of jigs with your table saw, and then just an overview of pros and cons of both of these fences. So with the Versa fence, you have a couple options. They have a 48-inch option and a 36-inch option, and then this storage tray over here. So the 48-inch fence is $170. The 36-inch fence is $160. And then the storage tray on the right here is $45. So if you do want to get the storage tray and the 48-inch fence, you're looking at an all-in price at $215. And if you go with the 36-inch fence and the storage tray, you're looking at about $205. Now, if you go with the auxiliary rip fence, they only offer this in a 48-inch size and not a 36-inch size. So if you decide to get this, the auxiliary rip fence is $150. But you are going to need 3 track clamps to be able to clamp this to your fence. You could get away with 2, but I think it's best that you use 3 for this. And the track clamp that I recommend is this one by Semble. It has a threaded handle on it, not a ratcheting handle, and it's a lot easier to use with it. But if you don't have any of these clamps, you're going to need to buy at least 3 of these. Woodpecker sells them in packs of 4 on their website, and it's $80 for 4 clamps, and you'll be using 3 of them. So your all-in price with clamps and everything for the auxiliary rip fence, the clamps are $80. This is $150, so we're at $230. And then your all-in price, as you remember, on the 48-inch Versa fence with the storage tray is $215. So it's $15 less for the Versa fence. Now, as far as compatibility goes with these two fence options, the Versa fence is only compatible with SawStop table saws, specifically the ICS and PCS T-Glide rip fence. That's the only thing that this thing's going to fit. Your auxiliary rip fence, however, it's way more universal, since the only way that you install it is by clamping it to your existing fence. So if you don't have a SawStop and you want a longer fence, then the auxiliary rip fence is definitely the way that you're going to have to go, since this won't fit your saw. Now, if you do have a SawStop, one thing to consider is that this is a more permanent option. I don't go and take this thing off and put on my old fence ever. This stays installed. These are my old fence pieces, and I just leave them off. Now, if I use this, I can just clamp it on when I want a longer reference, and then take it off when I don't. Now, I've only found one major drawback about having the Versa fence permanently installed on my fence, and it's the fact that it kind of gets in the way of me being able to use jigs like this. This is a tenon jig, and it used to straddle my fence and ride along there. I've used this a couple times. I don't use it every day, so it wasn't really a deal breaker. But the reason it doesn't work now is these knobs are in the way. So if you have any jigs that straddle your table saw fence and you use them often, you won't be able to use them anymore if you go with the Versa fence. Now, of course, you could just quickly remove this whole setup and still use your jigs. It would just take a little longer to uninstall this and then reinstall it. But if you went with the auxiliary rip fence, your stock fences still stays attached, and all you have to do is just unclamp and remove this, and then you can get back to using your jigs as you like. But one thing that I value about this fence, the major thing, is that it's compatible with these Jessam clear-cut stock guides. These are a great accessory, and I've been wanting them for a while. I just didn't want to drill into my table saw to attach these, and this slot on the Versa fence fits these perfectly. So that's kind of the major reason why I went with this over the auxiliary rip fence. Next, let's go over how each of these fences affect your scale indicator and how they affect it in different ways. So if you go with the auxiliary rip fence and you just clamp it to your standard fence, it's definitely going to throw off your scale. But the good thing about this is it is a perfect 2 inches thick. So what you'll have to do is basically compensate every time you set your fence. So basically, if you wanted to rip something at 10 inches wide, you would actually have to set your scale indicator at 12 inches, since this is 2 inches thick, to achieve that 10-inch rip. So for this one, you got to always compensate 2 inches and add that to your mark. Now for the Versa fence, this is 7/8 of an inch thick, and the stock fence that comes on here is only a 1/2 inch thick. The scale indicator that comes stock on the SawStop doesn't have enough left to right adjustment. So if you do want to roll with the stock indicator that comes with your saw, you will have to file these slots open to the right about 3/16 of an inch, and that's what I did. I have a whole video showing how I dialed this in, and I will link that down below or at the end of this video. If you don't want to file down your scale indicator though, Woodpeckers does include this powder coated scale indicator. I also show this off in that video if you're interested in learning more about that. Now here's my list of pros and cons when it comes to the Versa fence. One thing I like about it is that there's a 48-inch option and a 36-inch option. With the auxiliary rip fence, it's only available in 48 inches. I also like that this fence is 100% compatible with these Just-Some clear-cut stock guides, and I love this storage tray over here where I can keep everything nice and organized. I also like how you can dial in the scale indicator. Yes, you do have to do a small modification to it, but it's really easy and it doesn't take long. But I like that this can be accurate and I don't have to add 2 inches to each cut like I do with the auxiliary rip fence. I also like how easy it is to adjust this fence in or out. On the Versa fence, all you have to do is loosen these 5 knobs. And then once you do that, you can slide the fence further in or further out to give you more support wherever you need it. With the auxiliary rip fence, you have to go through the process of unclamping all 3 clamps, moving it. It's more intuitive, I believe, with the Versa fence. My last pro for the Versa fence would have to be the price. Your all-in option for the 48-inch one with the storage tray, you're looking at $215. For the auxiliary rip fence, like I said, you have to buy those 3 clamps. If you have to buy the 3 clamps with it and the fence, you're at $230. So we're $15 cheaper with the Versa fence. Now my only 2 cons, I guess, for this tool are the fact that it limits your ability to use jigs with it. Like I said, if you want to use jigs, you're going to have to remove this to be able to use your saddle jigs. And then the second con that I have is the limited compatibility. You have to have a SawStop to be able to use the Versa fence. Whereas the auxiliary rip fence, you can clamp it to any table saw fence pretty much on the market. Another thing this fence has going for it is the height of the fence. This fence is almost 4 inches tall, and the Versa fence is just over 2.5 inches tall. So you get a little more height. If you're looking for a taller fence, this is a good option. Another thing that could be looked at as positive is that it's less permanent than the Versa fence. You can easily unclamp this and get to using your jigs that you designed to specifically straddle your table saw's rip fence. The auxiliary rip fence is also a bit more versatile than the Versa fence. It can be mounted in 3 different ways. There's a normal setting like this, there's a low setting, and then you can elevate it to help with like template work. The last pro I have for the auxiliary rip fence is the in-feed support bracket that comes with it. This in-feed support bracket is 12 inches long, and this one is only 7 inches long. So if you're looking for something with a little more in-feed support, that's a good determining factor for the auxiliary rip fence. Now I do have 3 cons when it comes to the auxiliary rip fence. Number 1 being that you need to have 3 track clamps to be able to properly clamp this to your fence. Track clamps are not cheap, and chances are you don't have 3 of them lying around your shop, so you're going to need to buy 3 of these to be able to use this fence. Another con is that your scale will always be inaccurate whenever you go to use this fence. Sure, you can add your 2 inches to it, but you always have to mentally remember to add the 2 inches. The number that you're reading on your scale will always be wrong. You'll always have to add 2 inches. If you don't think that's a big deal, that's fine. Go with it, you know? I'm just trying to give you the options of what you have here. My third and final con with the auxiliary rip fence is that it is not compatible with the Just Some Clear Cut stock guides. I use these quite a bit, especially when I'm working with like sheet goods, plywood, stuff like that. So that is why I prefer the VersaFence. So which one do I recommend for you? Well, if you have a SawStop, I would say definitely go with the VersaFence. I like it a lot more. My biggest con, I guess, was that I can't use my jigs as easily, as quickly. I just have to go through the process of removing this. It only takes me a couple minutes. It's not hard. But yeah, if you have the SawStop, I'd say definitely go with this. I really like the storage tray over here on the right. That's been a game changer. It's really decluttered my table saw. And if you don't have a SawStop, that's fine. The auxiliary rip fence will fit your saw. You will have, you know, more support either on the in feed or the out feed, wherever you need it. They're both good options. If you had to pick between the auxiliary rip fence or the VersaFence for your table saw, I'm curious. Let me know which one you would pick down below in the comments. If you want to learn more about either of these fences, I do have a couple videos that I've done on both of these, and you might find those pretty valuable, so click those videos here.